Today's video is going to be all about Ulmo. Ulmo is the Valar of water and so much more. I think that you're going to find that Tolkien was describing a very deep type of explanation about the world and about the universe through Ulmo's powers. And what's particularly interesting is the way that he doesn't directly talk about it, but he shows it in his stories, and especially in the Silmarillion. So I'm going to go through and read you some places where Ulmo is talked about and show you in his actions and the way that he is described is what kind of powers and properties that he represents within all of us, because that's the thing about these videos. They are not to get you to worship something outside of yourself, but to discover the true powers within yourself and to be able to amplify them within your daily life and provide you a newfound experience that brings out the strengths inside of you all. So this begins with Ulmo's intro. That's when we first meet Ulmo. And this is what it says in the Silmarillion. But the other Ainur looked upon this habitation, set within the vast spaces of the world, which the Elves call Arda, the earth, and their hearts rejoiced in light, and their eyes, beholding many colors, were filled with gladness. But because of the roaring of the sea, they felt a great unquiet, and they observed the winds and the air, and the matters of which Arda was made, of iron and stone, and silver and gold, and many substances. But of all these, water they most greatly praised. And it is said by the Eldar that in water there lives yet the echo of the music of the Ainur, more than in any substance else that is in this earth. And many of the children of Iluvatar hearkened, still unsated, to the voices of the sea, and yet know not for what they listen. And if this is your first time hearing this, the Ainur are basically thought forms that came from the mind of Eru. Think of Eru as nothing else but only a soul consciousness that awakened. And through that, thought forms started to come forth. And then they split off and divided themselves into the parts of the mind that they represented within Eru. And so that is what the Ainur are. And they're looking at the world, realizing all of that, their music that they have created. Now to water had that Ainu, whom the elves called Ulmo, turned his thought. And of all most deeply was he instructed by Iluvatar in music. But of the airs and winds Manwe most had pondered, who is the noblest of the Ainur. Of the fabric of earth and had Ule thought, to whom Iluvatar had given skill and knowledge scarce less than to Melkor. And Iluvatar spoke to Ulmo and said, Seest thou not how here in this little realm, in the deeps of time, Melkor hath made war upon thy province? He hath bethought him of bitter cold, immoderate, and yet hath not destroyed the beauty of thy fountains, nor of thy clear pools. Behold the snow, and the cunning work of frost. Melkor hath devised heats and fire without restraint, and hath not dried up thy desire, nor utterly quelled the music of the sea. Behold rather the height and glory of the clouds, and the ever-changing mists, and listen to the fall of rain upon the earth. And in these clouds thou art drawn near to Manwe, thy friend, whom thou lovest. Then Ulmo answered, Truly, water is become now fairer than my heart imagined. Neither had my secret thought conceived the snowflake, nor in all my music was contained the falling of the rain. I will seek Manwe, that he and I may make melodies forever to thy delight. And Manwe and Ulmo have from the beginning been allied, and in all things have served most faithfully the purpose of Iluvatar. And Manwe is the Vala of the sky and Ulmo of the waters, and so they have been friends ever since. But even as Ulmo spoke, and while the Ainur were yet gazing upon this vision, it was taken away and hidden from their sight, and it seemed to them that in that moment they perceived a new thing, darkness, which they had not known before except in thought. But they had become enamored of the beauty of the vision and engrossed in the unfolding of the world which came there to being, and their minds were filled with it, for the history was incomplete, and the circles of time not full wrought, when the vision was taken away. And some have said that the vision ceased ere the fulfillment of the dominion of men, and the fading of the firstborn, the Elves. Wherefore, though the music is over all, the Valar had not seen as with sight the later ages or the ending of the world, because that rests only in Eru's mind of what would happen in the very end. I'm going to keep on going here and show you the mannerisms and kind of the behavior of Ulmo that was very unique to the other Valar. Ulmo is the Lord of Waters. He is alone. He dwells nowhere long, but moves as he will in all the deep waters about the earth or under the earth. He is next in might to Manwe, and before Valinor was made, he was closest to him in friendship. But thereafter he went seldom to the councils of the Valar, unless great matters were in debate, for he kept all Arda in thought, and he has no need of any resting place. Moreover, he does not love to walk upon land, and will seldom clothe himself in a body, after the manner of his peers. If the children of Eru beheld him, they were filled with a great dread, for the arising of the king of the sea was terrible, as a mounting wave that strides to the land, with dark helm foam-crested, and raiment of mail shimmering from silver down into shadows of green. The trumpets of Manwe are loud, but Ulmo's voice is deep, as the deeps of the ocean, which he only has seen. So there we see what Ulmo's real form is, which is basically like a giant wave and everything that you can attribute to an ocean. And he rarely took body form. So he was everywhere at once, because water itself, we'll learn more about the dominion of Ulmo. Water itself cannot be really contained unless in a container itself. But on Earth is mostly water. So water is everywhere. And here we learn still more of his habits. But Ulmo was alone, and he abode not in Valinor, nor ever came thither, unless there were need for a great council. He dwelt from the beginning of Arda in the outer ocean, and still he dwells there. He dwelt from the beginning of Arda in the outer ocean. Thence he governs the flowing of all waters, and the ebbing, the courses of all rivers, and the replenishment of springs, the distilling of all dews and rain in every land beneath the sky. In the deep places he gives thought to music great and terrible, and the echo of that music runs through all the veins of the world, in sorrow and in joy. For if joyful is the fountain that rises in the sun, its springs are in the wells of sorrow, unfathomed at the foundations of the earth. The Teleri learned much of Ulmo, and for this reason their music has both sadness and enchantment. Salmer came with him to Arda, he who made the horns of Ulmo, that none may ever forget who once has heard them, and Osi and Unin also, to whom he gave the government of the waves and the movements of the inner seas, and many other spirits beside. And thus it was the power of Ulmo that even under the darkness of Melkor, life coursed still through many secret lodes, and the earth did not die. And to all who were lost in the darkness, or wandered from the light of the Valar, the ear of Ulmo was ever open, nor has he ever forsaken Middle-earth, and whatsoever may since have befallen of ruin or of change, he has not ceased to take thought for it, and will not until the end of days. And that is so true. Tolkien was really bringing out the notion that all bodies of water are all connected. They all flow from the same source of hydrogen and oxygen. And mostly everything contains hydrogen, and most atoms are made of what's water made of. Water is everywhere. It's the element essential to life, and it is the element that all life springs forth from. And if you want to think about evolution and creationism, I personally believe in both, and I can talk about that in another video. But life evolved from water itself. And so Ulmo, he contains this knowledge and wisdom of the prime source in which all life flows from, which is water, and also beyond water, the spiritual truth of Eru's mind and of the universal consciousness that we all stem from, very much branching off like rivers from a prime source of water. And I'll keep going. There's so much about Ulmo. Then again, the Valar were gathered in council, and they were divided in debate. For some, and of those Ulmo was the chief, held that the Quendi was the name that the elves gave themselves, which mean those who speak or sing, because they never saw any other creatures on Arda that spoke like them or that could have the gift of language, because they were the firstborn beside the animals. And so they called themselves the Quendi. And it says here that Ulmo was the chief who held that the Quendi should be left free to walk as they would in Middle-earth, and with their gifts of skill to order all the lands and heal the hurts. But the most part feared for the Quendi in the dangerous world amid the deceits of the starlit dusk, and they were filled moreover with the love and the beauty of the elves, and desired their fellowship. And at last, therefore, the Valar summoned the Quendi to Valinor, there to be gathered at the knees of the powers in the light of the trees forever. And Mandos broke his silence, saying, "So it is doomed." From this summons came many woes that afterwards befell. So what this is suggesting is that Ulmo truly loved the elves, and he wanted them to walk freely on Middle-earth and not be called to Valinor. And the reason why the elves were called to Valinor after the Ainur, who became the Valar, created the elves, was that they fell in love with their own creation. There was a bit of possessiveness within them. They wanted to gather the creations to themselves and have them stay with them, like a parent with a child that would keep the child at home forever, just because they loved them so much and they were afraid of the darkness that might be there in the world. The Valar wanted to keep their children, the elves, to them. And Ulmo was the only Valar that thought of their freedom, thought of giving them the chance to just run free in Middle-earth for all time. And so with the choice of calling some of the elves to Valinor and some elves leaving, Ulmo was very saddened by this, because he loved to be able to communicate to the elves and talk to them and visit them when they lived close to the shoreline. And so this was something that was different, that made him different than the other Valar. And it's because of the special, unique properties of water being completely free, and unless it has a container, it cannot be tamed. You cannot tame the ocean. You can only keep it for a little while, but as soon as there's a hole, or if there's some crack in the container, the water flows freely, and it will flow all over the place. It is completely free. So that very property of water is what gave him this desire to see the freedom of the elves and all the other beings on Arda, to be able to walk around freely and not be coddled by the Valar, because simply they were their creations. So I think that there's a great lesson in there for parents and for those that, make something and they don't want to give it away because they become very possessive of it. And Ulmo really understood the nature of freedom, that when you love something, you are free to, you allow its freedom. And it's with that love and that trust that really symbolizes true love, rather than being possessive and holding something close to you that doesn't allow it to freely grow. So Ulmo was different in that regard and held that idea. And here is another thing that makes Ulmo a little bit different. And this is also a property that he represented, the intuition or the subconsciousness. And so this is what it says here. This is at a time when Melkor already destroyed much things already on Arda, and the Valar were basically seeing if he could be part of their group, and they kept Melkor in the Hall of Mondos constrained, but then they brought Melkor back in front of them to see if he changed. And this is what Ulmo thought. Before the gates of Valmar, Melkor abased himself at the feet of Manwë and sued for pardon, vowing that if he might be made only the least of the free people of Valinor, he would aid the Valar in all their works, and most of all in the healing of the many hurts that he had done in the world. And Nienna aided his prayer, but Mondos was silent. And then Manwë granted him pardon. But the Valar would not yet suffer him to depart beyond their sight and vigilance, and he was constrained to dwell within the gates of Valmar. But fair seeming were all the words and deeds of Melkor in that time, and both the Valar and the Eldar had profit from his aid and counsel, if they sought it, and therefore in a while he was given leave to go freely about the land. And it seemed to Manwë that the evil of Melkor was cured. For Manwë was free from evil and could not comprehend it, and he knew that in the beginning, in the thought of Iluvatar, Melkor had been even as he, and he saw not to the depths of Melkor's heart, and did not perceive that all love had departed from him forever. But Ulmo was not deceived, and Tolkis clenched his hands whenever he saw Melkor, his foe, go by. And that's something that you learn in the Silmarillion, is that Ulmo never was deceived by Melkor, never was deceived by the evil in Melkor's heart, the jealousy, the envy, the need to cause discord, because that's simply the music that he created and what he was from. And that was the part of Ulmo, was he represented the intuition. And I'm going to tell you right here, your intuition is always right. It's always accurate if it really truly comes from the place of the intuition. And it takes some time to learn what comes from the place of intuition and what comes from the superficial mind or the ego. But there are ways to tell, and you could definitely feel it within yourself. It's kind of like this gut instinct that you can feel. It's like in your stomach or in your heart. And so that's a way that you can tell physically, but there are other ways to tell when you're following your intuition, and Ulmo represented that. And part of the reason is that intuition is connected to the subconscious. Your subconscious has both the things that you don't want to look at, being good and also being bad, and the idea of trauma and things that you have stored away, kind of at a place where you just are not ready to look at. And so it's in your subconscious, it's underneath that surface, so that you could go to work and you could do your daily things. But within that subconscious, along with trauma and lifetime events, and also past life experiences, what also is in the subconscious is the theme of your life that you have decided to play out. Like Eru created the theme of the universe, the theme of the universe, your personal universe that you have designed before time, before coming into this physical body. That's what's within the subconscious. So the intuition, when you tap into the intuition, you're pulling those old memories out. And so that's what Ulmo represents, going deep within the self. And your intuition is always accurate because it is you. It is your pure, unique spark of consciousness that is connected solely to the prime purpose of your existence. And whatever that may be, it's different for everyone. But there is also a running theme that exists in all life. So tapping into the intuition gets you into that place where you're always on point. You know what's going on beneath the surface, even when people may show you surface lies and they may look like they are doing something good, like Melkor. Ulmo was still able to read beyond that surface exterior and look deep and straight into Melkor's heart, which is what he is connected to, because everything is all connected and everything stems from Eru's mind. So he knew in his deeper place of truth that Melkor was lying. He was deceiving them all. But Ulmo had the wisdom to allow things to take place, to allow the events that were going to happen take place, even with sorrow in his heart. He knew that there was going to be darkness because he was tuned into the music that was going to play out in Ea, the universe of Middle Earth, and Arda, which represents Earth. He was in tune with that. And although there was great sorrow within that music, there was also great joy and love as well. And in order to have both, in order to have that joy, you need to have both. And that dual experience is what he understood that needed to take place. So I'll keep it going, and that is why he was never deceived, one of the Valar who was never deceived by Melkor. So here is the part where men awaken, because we know that Ulmo loved the elves, and the elves were definitely the firstborn that he loved. But then there was the men that came, and did Ulmo love the men as much? Well, let's see. Here it says, Ulmo, and I'll say this before I read that part. At the first rising of the sun, younger children of Iluvatar awoke in the land of Hildorinen in the eastward regions of Middle Earth. But the first sun arose in the west, and the opening eyes of men were turned towards it, and their feet, as they wandered over the earth, for the most part strayed that way. So the elves awoke through the stars and through the sounds of the water, and men awoke through the sun and being awakened by the sunlight. The Atani, they were named by the Eldar, the second people, but they called them also Hildor, the followers, and many other names. Of men, little is told in these tales, which concern the eldest days, before the waxing of mortals and the waning of the elves, save of those fathers of men, the Antantari, who in the first years of the sun and moon wandered into the north to the world. To Hildorian there came no Vala to guide men, or to summon them to dwell in Valinor, and men have feared the Valar rather than loved them, and have not understood the purposes of the powers, being at variance with them and at strife with the world. This is a very important part to talk about of the Elven spiritual path versus regular religion that Tolkien was trying to say, is that in the past, in the ages, men on Earth have feared the powers that seem to be higher than them and more powerful than them, and they've learned how to fear them, and through that fear they learned how to worship them. And with that worship came sacrifice and things like that, in which they started to devote themselves in a way that almost trained their minds to think that these gods were separate from them, that these powers were separate from them. And what Tolkien is saying is that the elves loved the Valar as part of them, as an extension, a larger extension of the powers that reside within them and within all the universe and within their world that they knew. And whereas men, they had the fear of the Valar, and with fear came worship and also hate and turning away. So men did not get all of the Valar help as much as the elves did. But Ulmo is different. So this is what he thought. So Ulmo nonetheless thought for them, aiding the counsel and will of Manwë, and his messages came often to them by stream and flood. But they have not skill in such matters, and still less had they in those days before they had mingled with the elves. Therefore they loved the waters, and their hearts were stirred, but they understood not the messages. Yet it is told that ere long they met dark elves in many places, and were befriended by them. And dark elves, in Tolkien's definition, are just simply the elves that turned away from the chance to sail to Valinor. They turned away from the light of Valinor, whereas other elves, like many of the Teleri and other of the firstborn, they sailed off to Valinor, causing Ulmo to be very sad. But they enjoying their life in Valinor, in a place of light, a realm of fairy. And the dark elves started to go further into the forest and in the mountains, like the Noldor and the Mirkwood elves, and they started to live there and forget about the light across the sea to the west. So that's why they were called the dark elves. And that was basically the beginning of the men and the elves intermingling with each other, and they befriended them and also had relationships with them. And men became the companions and disciples in their childhood of these ancient folk, wanderers of the elven race who never set out upon the paths to Valinor, and knew of the Valar only as a rumor and a distant name. So I always thought that was interesting with Ulmo, that he was the one Valar that was in touch with the men still, that all the other Valar did not talk to the men when they awakened, or they allowed them to kind of do their own thing. And they understood that in a way, men at that age and at that stage would not be able to understand the powers of the Valar, and also truly not the messages and being able to read the messages within the water like the elves were able to do. The elves were able to learn music by Ulmo, whereas men were not. Not until they started to breed or intermingle with elves and gain that elven bloodline that gave them that skill and that ability to be able to read, just because they were the firstborn. The elves represent being closest to Valinor, being closest to understand the Valar. And so when men then started to mix with the elves, that's when they had this ability to kind of evolve their skills. It's very much like the story of Earth and our origins and how we evolved. Tolkien was definitely trying to give us that message. All right, I will keep on going here. So there's some other really interesting parts that show Ulmo as well. Ulmo has a way of giving messages in streams and in rivers. Whenever men and elves were kind of sitting by the water, they would get these visions or kind of this feeling like they had to go do something. And that's kind of how he gave them their messages, not through words, but through a thought coming in and being inspired by sitting around these bodies of water. And that happens to us a lot. I know for me, when I'm sitting on a beach and I'm gazing out, into the sea or a lake, I clearly get some inspiration, and I feel like I get in touch with this deeper voice that is connected to everything. And so this is the way that the elves receive their messages, and this is how man started to receive their message. But one time, Ulmo showed up in full body form in order to give a message to Turgon. And so this is what happened here. Then Turgon pondered long the counsel of Ulmo, and there came into his mind the words that were spoken to him. Love not too well the work of thy hands and the devices of thy heart, and remember that the true hope of the Noldor lieth in the west, and cometh from the sea. So, and it says, but Turgon was become proud, and Gondolin as beautiful as a memory of Elven Tirion, and he trusted still in its secret and strength. So this is when Ulmo started to try to give warnings that it's important for you not to love too much the earthly things that you create. And this is like the story of Babylon and all these stories of fallen civilizations, is that when men become so focused on their creations that they tune out the spiritual world. And so that very much was the warning. It's like, don't love too much the material world, because on the other side of the sea, that's where the true destiny of the Noldor lives, and that's where eventually all go. And so to remember that while you're on this physical earth, that there's a spiritual place for you as well. And to remember that, and remember the power of the sea that will carry you forward into the west. So that's when Ulmo then appeared and gave that warning, which he has done a couple times to different people. And we also see Ulmo's powers. So like Nienna's tears had the power to purify and heal. And Ulmo also, being water, it said that Ulmo's in the very beginning, the foundation of Arda, to grow all the trees. When Yavanna was planting the trees, Ulmo's water held their roots and allowed for all the trees to grow. So the idea of just water being the essential element for all life to grow, also it's about healing as well. And so here it says that Ulmo also created places, especially by his river Sirion and some other places in Arda, all bodies of water were a place of rest and healing for those that were weary or hurt, that somehow there was a power in the water that allowed them to heal themselves, but not always so strong that it would, completely replenish them, but to a point where it could help heal them. So Ulmo did have some healing powers as well. And this here, it says that it is said that in a time Ulmo came to Valinor out of the deep waters and spoke there to the Valar of the need of the elves. And he called on them to forgive them and rescue them from the overmasting might of Morgoth and win back the Silmarillion, wherein alone now bloomed the light of the days of bliss, when the two trees still shone in Valinor. But Manwë moved not, and of the counsels of his heart what tale shall tell? The wise have said that the hour was not yet come, and that only one speaking in person for the cause of both elves and men, pleading for pardon on their misdeeds and pity on their woes, might move the counsels of the powers. So this is when we see Ulmo, and he's done this several times, he's always kind of going to bat for the elves and men, whereas the Valar are very much in judgment of what the Noldor elves did and also what man has done. Ulmo is the one that is always speaking for the benefit of the elves and man. And here we see that Ulmo had a power to transform Elwing into a white, graceful bird. It says here, For Ulmo bore up Elwing out of the waves, and he gave her the likeness of a great white bird, and upon her breast there shone as a star the Silmaril, as she flew over the water to seek Eärendil, her beloved, because there came a point where Elwing was trying to hide the Silmaril because it was causing so much destruction and jealousy between the elves, and it was really kind of this point of seduction for elves and for men. So she ended up carrying the Silmaril and well, basically jumping into the ocean with the Silmaril because she wanted to get rid of it. And she sacrificed herself, and instead Ulmo saw that sacrifice and bore her back up and gave her wings to fly with the Silmaril. So there's always that support from Ulmo to help the elves and help the men. That was another indication of that. And here we see that there was more. There's more indication that Ulmo also was the one to stick up for the elves and said this: "It is told among the elves that after Eärendil had departed, seeking Elwing his wife, Mondo spoke concerning his fate and said, 'Shall mortal man step living upon the undying lands and yet live?' But Ulmo said, 'For this he was born into the world. And say unto me, whether is he Eärendil Tuor's son of the line of Hador, or the son of Idril, Turgon's daughter, of the elven house of Finwë?' And Mondos answered equally the Noldar, who went willfully into exile, may not return hither." And lastly, I will just say that it was Ulmo who decided to have a way for the Noldar to eventually sail to the west, that the compassion in his heart for the Noldar being exiled, because when they had the chance to go to Valinor, they turned away from it, and they also killed the Teleri elves, which he really was friends with. So there was a great sadness and an anger in Ulmo for a very long time. But eventually Ulmo decided to allow for the time to come when the elves would decide to sail to Valinor, the Noldar, and that's when Galadriel, we learn in the Third Age, and Elrond and the other elves, they finally step upon the boat when basically it is the ending of the elves and when their work was completely finished on Arda. And the reason why there is the ship that can sail them and to the west is because of Ulmo's construction with Ule, bringing this beautiful ship that would always carry the elves if they decide and make their choice to go to Valinor. So elves have to come completely on just the volunteer basis of their hearts to want to leave from the earth and go to the spiritual world. But it's all based on, their freedom. But Ulmo created these ships so that one day they can make that choice. So he was always thinking of them. And I think that it represents the idea that we ourselves were made of 70% of water. Water is within all beings. So water is the element that's most connected to us or essential to life in a way. And so Ulmo had to be there always for all, his beings that he helped create, because water is something that you cannot make separate from life itself. Now, there are some things that I found in the Book of Lost Tales, Volume 1 and Volume 2, but I'm not going to make this too long because there's so much to talk about with Ulmo, and I definitely wanted to make this as concise as I could, but it is very much a deep subject, and I found that there's so much to talk about. But I wanted to read this to you. This is going back as notes for the Silmarillion about the creation of Arda and what it meant. Here is, Tolkien made a note here that said this: "Now when they reached the midmost void, they beheld a sight of surpassing beauty and wonder where before had been emptiness. But Iluvatar said, 'Behold, your choiring and your music. Even as ye played, so of my will your music took shape, and lo, even now the world unfolds, and its history begins, as did my theme in your hands. Each one herein will find contained within the design that is mine, the endowments and embellishments that he himself devised. Nay, even Melko will discover those things there which he thought to contrive of his own heart, out of harmony with my mind, and he will find them but a part of the whole, and tributary to its glory. One thing only have I added, the fire that giveth life and reality. And behold, this secret fire burnt at the heart of the world. Then the Ainur marveled to see how the world was globed amid the void, and yet separated from it. And they rejoiced to see the light, and found it was both white and golden, and they laughed for the pleasure of colors, and for the great roaring of the ocean they were filled with longing. Their hearts were glad because of air, and the winds and the matters wherefore the earth was made, iron and stone and silver and gold and many substances. But of all these water was held the fairest, and most goodly, and most greatly praised. Indeed, there liveth still in water a deeper echo of the music of the Ainur than in any substance else that is in the world. And at this latest day, many of the sons of men will hearken unstatedly to the voice of the sea, and long for they know not what. Know then that water was for the most part the dream and invention of Ulmo, the Ainu, whom Iluvatar had instructed deeper than all others in the depths of music, while the air and winds and the ethers of the firmament had Manwe Sulimo devised, greatest and most noble of the Ainur. Now Iluvatar spoke to Ulmo and said, Seest thou not how Melko hath bethought him of biting colds without moderation, yet hath not destroyed the beauty of thy crystal waters, nor of all thy limpid pools? Even where he has thought to conquer utterly, behold, snow has been made, and frost has wrought his exquisite works. Ice has reared his castles in grandeur. So this part was really interesting, that Melkor was the one that was responsible for making snow so cold and bitter and can kill you if you're out for too long. But the beauty of snow, the beauty of the ice, and just the actual appearance of it, and the property of the crystalline structures is what basically is the positive sides of what Melkor has created. And to show that even though Melkor was trying to create discord, and he was trying to create all this problems on Middle Earth and before that in the universe itself, he was still working towards something. And that something was to have that grand theme play out, where all traumatic and sorrow and dark events would play out, but in the end, there would be rejoicing and joy, and the light would come out and end that darkness. And that was the theme that was playing out, is that good always triumphs over evil. And so even though Melkor devised a way that water and, all the elements basically could be manipulated and transformed into something bad or dangerous, there was still great beauty and also a way that you could survive in the snow, and you can enjoy it for its beauty and for its gifts that it gives its beings, that live on Arda. So that I thought was really important there. And Ulmo loved the snow, and he loved all the parts of water, and he said, wow, I never even thought of how much more beautiful this could be. And that's what he said. It says, then said Ulmo, yea, truly is water fairer now than was my best devising before. Snow is of a loveliness beyond my most secret thoughts, And if there is little music therein, yet rain is beautiful indeed, and hath a music that filleth my heart. So glad am I that my ears have found it, though its sadness is among the saddest of all things. Lo, I will go seek Sulmo of the air and winds, that he and I play melodies forever and ever to thy glory and rejoicing. Now Ulmo and Manwe have been great friends and allies in almost all matters since then. So the thing about the Silmarillion is that it was not a book published by Tolkien, but it was actually notes that Christopher Tolkien, who has also passed away and rests in his Valinor, he created a book for us now to understand Tolkien's notes of what he was thinking in his mind, of what created the Middle-earth world. And so the Book of Lost Tales is basically notes that did not maybe get into the published copy of the Silmarillion, but they were also things that Tolkien wrote, and so it's gathered in the Book of Lost Tales. It's really interesting to read. And sometimes it just kind of expands more on what already was published. So I like reading that part. Now, a very interesting part about the outer oceans is this here. So, knowing all their hearts, still did Iluvatar grant the desire of the Ainur, nor is it said he was grieved thereat. So entered these great ones into the world, and these are they whom we now call the Valar. They dwelt in Valinor, or in the firmament, and some on earth, or in the deeps of the sea. There Melko ruled both fires and the cruelest frost, both the outermost colds and the deepest furnaces beneath the hills of flame, and whatso is violent or excessive, sudden or cruel, in the world is laid to his charge, and for the most part with justice. But Ulmo dwells in the outer ocean and controls the flowing of all waters and the courses of rivers, the replenishment of springs and the distilling of rains and dews throughout the world. At the bottom of the sea he bethinks him of music deep and strange, yet full ever of a sorrow, and therein he has aid from Manwe Sulmo. And there you see that he had music that was also very beautiful, but it was full of sorrow because he knew the theme that had to take place. He was the one instructed in the music most by Iluvatar. And so what I have discovered is that what Tolkien was talking about was that the music represents the memory of the themes that was to play out. And what now we know is that water holds memory. And I will get to that part in the end and show you this this way that recently they have discovered that water holds memory. And Ulmo had the power of music and voices of instruments. So very poetically, it's talked about how he taught the Teleri elves and all that would, sit by his shores how to make music with the voice and also with instruments. And the instruments started to become created by using shells. And that's kind of the first instruments that were made by the Teleri and was taught by Ulmo. And Ulmo, his outer seas is kind of this interesting place because the inner seas are the ones that are closest to the shores and part of the seas that can be seen by the Eldar, the elves, or even by men when they awakened. And the outer seas are like at the edges of the world, basically. Not necessarily that the world was flat, but in Tolkien's idea, the outer seas are the borders of the world. And they contained everything within, through gravity and holding the waters down. But Ulmo dwelled there in the outer seas, and it was close to the void of space. And so the waters, the outer sea and space were connected close to each other as far as that spiritual representation of being kind of, as above, so below, and being so close to one another. And I believe that this reflects something that is told in almost all religions, especially the Bible and some of the Abrahamic ones. The idea is that there was a spiritual water, and I can even read the part here. I have my I have my Masonic Lodge Bible here for the Gnostics in the audience. And this is where this kind of spiritual water takes place. In the beginning, God created the heaven and earth, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. So there's different layers of waters. The shallow water from the deep water, the waters of the ethereal space, and the waters that are at the edge of our world in terms of Tolkien's understanding in terms of outer seas. So Ulmo dwelt there in the outer seas, and when he was needed, he would then probably just arrive in an instant, being connected to all waters, all bodies of water, and he would go through channels of rivers and, flow up through the shorelines, through the inner seas. So every part of water was all connected, but Ulmo dwelt in the outer waters. And it's also related to kind of the mystical interpretation of what the universe is comprised of in terms of the physical states and the plasma states water is in, and the liquid states. And so there's all this idea of waters having just different properties to them depending on where they come from. So the outer seas is the most deepest water that is untouched by the elves and untouched by man, which I'm sure in our world, we still have parts of the waters that are untouched and probably have things underneath in the surface. There are abysses that we will never be able to touch bottom of unless we have the technology to do so. But the pressure of the ocean and the depths of the ocean is so vast that it's impossible for us to even touch ground sometimes. So it's really interesting for Tolkien to talk about Ulmo as in this way. And it says here that the outer seas that have no tides, and they are very cool and thin, dark waters that no boat can sail upon their bosom or fish swim within their depths, save the enchanted fish of Ulmo and his magic car. So no one can even really dwell in those waters, in those outer waters. And I think that Tolkien was a Christian, and he was relating to this idea of the spiritual notion of waters that divided into different layers upon our world. And it's just a way that one day science will discover, and I think it is already, just the different properties of water and what it represents to us. And this is a part here that I thought was really interesting. So Ulmo, he was given the knowledge of the music, mostly that Eru knew. And so Ulmo carried that within him like a secret. And so this is what it says here. Ulmo alone came not to the trees, but went down to the beach of Eldamar, and there he stood gazing into the gloom far out to the sea. And he called often with his most mighty voice, as though he would draw back those torrents to the bosom of the gods. and whiles he played deep, longing music of his magic conches, and to him alone lest it be. And here we see that he knew, and it says here, that Ulmo was foreknowing. Oh, here it is. Aforetime had Ulmo loved the Teleri very deeply, yet when he heard of their slaughter by the gnomes, and gnomes is also another word for Noldar, because in the very beginning, when Tolkien was trying to create his world and his Middle Earth, the Noldar elves were gnomes, but not the gnomes that we think of, and definitely not the gnomes part of folktale and legends, like the Germanic gnomes and other types of gnomes. He created his gnomes like the High Elves, but because that word was already being used in other ways, he dropped that word and simply called them the Noldar. But gnomes was a term that he did use for the Noldar in the very beginning in his notes for the Silmarillion, but then he got rid of it, and in the published Silmarillion there is no gnomes. So it says here that this is when Ulmo heard that the Teleri were killed by the Noldar elves, and he grieved indeed, but anger hardened not his heart, for Ulmo was foreknowing more than all the Valar, even than great Manwe, and perchance he saw many of the things that should spring from that flight, and the dread pains of the unhappy Noldar in the world, and the anguish wherewith they would extirpate the blood. And he wouldn't that. It need not be. So there you see that even though Ulmo was sad, his anger was softened because he understood what the theme was playing out as, is that, there was going to have to be some deaths. There was going to have to be tragedy and sorrow in order for the triumph of the good and of the light to come through in the world eventually. So he knew that. And Ulmo's knowledge of deeper thoughts, here it says this is where we get into the Vae. And the Vae is the name for the outer oceans, the spiritual waters that all life flows from, or it's like the prime source, the river of life. And this is where he talks about it. Lo, there is but one ocean, and that is Vae. For those that Osi esteemeth as oceans are but seas, waters that lie in the hollows of the rock. But Vae runneth from the wall of things unto the wall of things, whithersoever you may fare. Now to the north it is so cold that even its pale waters are frozen to a depth beyond thought or sounding, and to the south is such utter darkness and deceit, by reason of Ungoliant, the giant spider, that none save I alone may find a way. In this vast water floweth the wide earth, upheld by the word of Iluvatar. For naught else or fish or bark will swim therein to whom I have not spoken the great word that Iluvatar said to me, and bound them with the spell. But of the wide earth is even Valinor a part. And the substance of the earth is stone and metal, and the seas are pools in thy hollows, and the islands, save some few that swim, still unfettered, stand now like pinnacles from their weedy depths. Know that then that somewhat nearer stands Valinor to the great wall of things, wherein Iluvatar hath enclosed us, than doth than that furthest eastern shore. And this do I know, for diving beneath the world, often have I visited those unharbored beaches. For lo, O Valar, ye know not, all wonders and many secret things are there beneath the earth's dark keel, even where I have my mighty halls of Ulmanen that ye have never dreamed on. So this is where it gets very interesting in the idea of not only the surface water, but he's talking about what's inside of the layers of earth, the hollows and the caves of water. That water it runs so much more deep than the Valar even realize, but that only he who can go everywhere and be everywhere at every time and all at once, can see that depth of these hidden places within deep inside of Earth. And this is something that many of humans are discovering, is that there are places in near the core of the Earth that there are civilizations, and there are places that one day we will probably discover more and more. I know that the Palladians have their own colonies down there, and there's a lot of different types of life that is living beneath the surface of the Earth. And so this is what Ulmo is talking about, is that there are depths of the water that runs through these places and through these caves and hollows that are unknown by anyone else except for him. But all life is connected. There's only one ocean. That's it. There's only one ocean. All water is shared, and it just gets divided into different places. But it is simply all from the same source, which is such a big lesson for all of us to understand, that everything may be so varied and different in its appearance, and but the thing is that it all flows from the same prime source of life. And if we can remember that, that is a power that Ulmo has. That's a knowledge that Ulmo has that the other Valar didn't, and he does. So I think I will end that right there, but I'm going to go into now, how can we apply these powers, the depths of intuition and the subconscious, and having this really deep knowledge within yourself. How can we apply all these benefits and music too? And so this is where I will talk about here. So the benefits of working with Ulmo goes into looking deeper into his powers, of properties that make up his powers. So unlike maybe other old pagan gods, we're not looking at Ulmo to control water. It's not necessarily looking at just the superficial element of water, but it's about looking at the symbolic properties of what water represents and what he was the Vala of. And so when you are aware of his powers, you can be aware of the powers within yourself. Let's go with music. He is known as the Vala of music. Why? Because when you listen to the ocean waves, there's this beautiful sound to many that love the sound of the ocean, but it's not necessarily the music that we know and hear on the radio, but it is music in some way. And so when we go to the definition of music, it's actually just sound that's organized by time. So within Tolkien's mind, music is the overall sounds, waves, frequencies, and vibrations that make up our reality, or Middle Earths, and all of Ea, which is the universe. And so music is something that he related to the idea of vibrations and the sound waves that would create the physical matter of reality. And music can come in many different forms, as we know, across all sorts of cultures and different instruments and different tones and sounds. Therefore, music is contained in the waves of the sea, because it is holding that vibration of creation within it, those sound waves. And Ulmo could teach the Elven music and help them create instruments to create beautiful sounds based on the purity of Eru's themes and thought of design. The idea that water itself is one of the purest elements, that it could be dirtied, but it itself cannot be actually taken apart and manipulated. That water is in its pure state, a simple element of hydrogen and oxygen within all beings. And so therefore, the idea of the music of water is the music of purity, the music of goodness, the music of a natural state of being that all souls reside in. And this is the music of nature that you can hear if you listen closely. You will hear the sounds in the trees and with the birds, and especially with the waves of the sea. So Tolkien was referring to a deeper concept that has only been recently proved, that water actually holds memory. And I will read this article that I found, which is so interesting about it here. Uh-oh, I just dropped that. So this is right here. So this is an article that was actually just written in 2017. So I guess this just recently happened. A new groundbreaking discovery has been made within the most basic of resources. Scientists have just discovered what they have called the discovery of the millennium, and a huge revelation in human consciousness. Scientists from Germany now believe that water has memory, meaning that what once was seen as a simple commodity has now been closely examined to reveal a scientific revelation, uncovering a mind-blowing truth. By examining individual drops of water at an incredibly high magnification, scientists were able to physically see that each droplet of water has its own individual microscopic pattern, each distinguishable from the next and uniquely beautiful. A scientific experiment was carried out whereby a group of students were all encouraged to obtain one drop of water from the same body of water, all at the same time. Through close examination of the individual droplets, it was seen that each produced different images. A second experiment was then carried out where a real flower was placed into a body of water, and after a while, a sample droplet of the water was taken out for examination. The resulted produced a mesmerizing pattern when hugely magnified, but all of the droplets of this water looked very similar. When the same experiment was done with a different species of flower, the magnified droplet looked completely different, thereby determining that a particular flower is evident in each droplet of water. Through this discovery, which shows that water has a memory, according to scientists, a new perception of water can be formed. The German scientists believe that as water travels, it picks up and stores information from all of the places that it has traveled through, which can thereby connect people to a lot of different places and sources of information when they drink this water, depending on the journey that it has been on. This has even been compared to the human body, of which each is incredibly unique and has an individual DNA unlike any other, whilst the human body is made up of 70% water. Conclusions could be drawn from these new discoveries that human tears can hold a unique memory of an individual being through the body's store of water hosting a complete store of information that is linked to individual experience, suggesting that everyone is globally connected by the water in the human body, which travels through ongoing journeys, whereby information along the way is always stored. How Tolkien knew this in the 30s, 40s, 50s, when he was starting to write this, is something that can only be attributed to his genius, ability to get in touch with his intuition, and not only his intuition, but the way the universe works on a very energetic level. He was very smart in that way, and he was able to come up with a way of poetically expressing this. So this experiment suggests that when we cry, we are actually releasing memories stored within the very atoms of water. Crying literally releases those memories, so you no longer have that in your experience. And that's why it's so healing to cry. You're literally getting rid of those past experiences so that you can move forwards and move on. And this is the healing property of water. It stores information, carries information, but it can easily be flushed out, and it's free to move. And so it's not stagnant. That experience in your life is not staying there and stagnant. but it can always be free to move and flow. And that's how we work as souls. Wonderful experiment. And Tolkien knew that on a very intuitive level. So I'll keep going here, this part. So this, because the human and elven body is made up of 70% water, this indicates your very cells within you hold memory, as they discovered all water does. Therefore, when you harness the true power of what Ulmo represents, you remember. Now, this is going to be a very deep concept, but I think many of you are ready. Within your subconscious and within your deepest parts of your soul, there's a memory and a tale before space and time of what existence is all about, what your life is all about, what you are supposed to do, what you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to create yourself. There's a memory there. Tapping into the powers of Ulmo helps you get in touch with that intuitive side of you that will remember the true you, the one that goes beyond the ego identity, the one that is beyond self-doubt and all these things that we do on earth, the one that is beyond earth, the one that is connected to all the stars, all elements, all beings in the entire universe, in the entire multiverse. You can remember that from this place of tapping into Ulmo's power. And that's the intuition, that's getting in touch with the subconscious, what lies beyond the surface consciousness that you're not ready to look at. Until you are ready. Remember, a reminder this is of a more pure state of being, like water, in its simplest form. What is the simplest form of you, your soul? A true power with yourself and a memory that your soul is just visiting Earth for a temporary time. So why not make it a lasting and special memory to add to your soul's experience and growth? And this is the biggest memory that I have gotten in touch with through these past years, and I pass it down to you. So this is the stored information that Ulmo had coming through me, my memory, and understanding that each of you can get in touch with that memory. Whatever it is, it might be unique for you, and it's going to be experienced uniquely. It's a memory that's ancient as time itself. And when you get in touch with that, nothing else matters on earth any longer. In terms of, you can go through hell on earth, but because you have that memory engaged and you remember and you're aware, earthly matters don't matter anymore. And that's the power of the elves. To allow things to brush off. They're immortal souls. You too are immortal. That's the message Tolkien was trying to give. Consciousness is immortal, not our bodies, but consciousness is immortal. And to remind yourself of that, it can make for a better experience, a more joyful one, in which one does not get lost in the dream, but starts to create from it and not allow the dream to move them, which is society, but to create within society as an awakened and aware soul. That's the power of Ulmo. One thing I will say about music is, I will not say thinking and focusing on the powers of Ulmo will automatically make you singers or, trained musicians. But here's what it will do, and what music symbolizes truly. It will allow a memory of a less inhibited nature come through you, and you may just start to sing more in life. A form of self-expression coming out uninhibited by your mental thoughts, saying you can't sing, or telling you that You have other things to worry about. That's your ego mind chattering. There's a part of you that can sing. That's your true soul coming out as a self-expression. And each one of you are supposed to do that on Earth. That's a very important part of feeling fulfilled soul-wise, by coming to Earth and doing what your soul has set out to do. And it's different for all of us based on your personal vibration and what turns you on and resonates with your soul and how you vibrate. Now, the other power that he represents, I talked about, was intuition. Ulmo represents the intuition. Without saying it, Tolkien shows Ulmo is always right of the Valar. Like, he's always in touch with the tune of the theme of the universe. He always knows it's accurate. Because why? Because it is the prime source. It is that calling from the prime source, reminding you of what's really going on and what's really happening. And it says here, he is given the music of Beryl and contains memory of all the themes to play out. And he knows best the mind of Eru. So intuition represents the subconscious in a good way. Here, tapped into by the intuition. Remembering themes of both joy and sorrow, and remembering why you must go through them. Remembering why you must take in the bad experiences, which are the experiences that we can get lost in. We can forget our true nature when we experience these experiences that are perceived as negative and bad, because they hurt so much. They cause so much pain and so much anguish. But beyond that, there's a truth there that if you get past that experience through healing and time, your pure spirit is waiting for you to remember and recognize the joy that you can have. Following your gut more in life, your intuition, a part of your subconscious truth, not close to the surface, gets you in touch with your higher self, that can lead you to make wiser decisions daily, more aligned with the desire to not get lost in this dream of the world, but remember your power as a creative being. The intuition is about taking that time to go deep and sit on the bottom of your ocean like Ulmo did. He would sit in the depths, the deepest parts of Arda in the ocean. And that's what every soul eventually can do and get to. And what do you find there is not scary at all, even though at first thinking going to the depths of the ocean is scary. It's dark, it's cold. But what you find there is it's just yourself sitting there. And that's not scary at all, because yourself is a pure divine spark of a universal consciousness. We each represent a part of the universal consciousness, the whole. And so it is not scary at all once you face it. And once you face some of the experiences that you've had and you push down into your subconscious because you don't want to look at it because it's scary, you don't want to think about it. When you are ready, when you get to that depth of your soul, you will find the true nature of yourself sitting there waiting for you to remember it. And this will allow you to develop the ability to stop self-doubting yourself and follow your instinct or your heart more. Trusting that inner voice inside, your conscience or your higher voice, working through you to guide you and explore a more joyful experience than a more difficult one. Not saying all your experiences are going to be joyful, but there is a possibility that when you are aware and awakened, you will have far more joyful experiences rather than difficult ones, because the difficult ones are sometimes experienced simply because you are unaware and don't remember. Once you remember and are aware of your true nature, the true nature of all things, That's the depths of the ocean of your soul. And when you remember that and you get there, that's when you can start to control your life or be more in flow with the theme of the universe itself and enjoy life from that place. The other part of his property is Vae, the properties of the outer seas, the water being everywhere at once, but the deepest, darkest, thin, cool ocean waters that cannot be even traveled except by enchanted fish of Ulmo. Remembering or being aware of Ulmo's outermost seas is about being more free yourself and feeling as if you can come and go as you please, as all beings do from a prime source that all life flows from. There is only one ocean, Ulmo reminds us in the Silmarillion, and that is a reminder that there's only one prime source. You are a part of that, and you should be free to explore and design your life and create and be liberated, completely free-spirited. But unfortunately, society and the ego mind traps us or makes us feel trapped. And this is the matrix that we design. Once you break out of that matrix, you are free. You are free then to explore and to create, and regardless of what other people think. That is your next phase. If you are ready to take that leap into your true self, this is what the power of Ulmo can do. I almost feel like Ulmo should come at the end because he's got such enormous powers of being so close to the mind of Eru. But this is the particular month of Ulmo based on the recognition of the different holidays of Tolkien's calendar. So that's why we do it today, and we'll do the ritual on Sunday. Tolkien's description of Ulmo being part of the Valar, but uncontained in Valinor itself, and doing his own thing, is the spirit of pure liberation and freedom. If anyone is ever feeling trapped or stuck in one place, all you need to do is capture the spirit of the freedom of water and not build your own container, but allow yourself to run free and flow out like the wildest seas. That's the property of water, free-spirited and uncontained. So Ulmo is about trusting your intuition more, not going with the group always, but still finding a way to work in harmony as a nurturing quality of Ulmo's to his elves and to his man and all beings of Arda. And next time you are at a beach, I want you to merge your thoughts with the seas, or the lake around you, through the sounds of the waves of the water. And you could do my 5-minute breathing exercise that I have on my channel. Through getting in flow and in tune with the sounds of the ocean, you will get in flow with the sounds of the music that the elves heard in the Silmarillion. And what you may hear is the sounds of your pure voice, your true soul that remembers why it's here, remember what to do and how to explore your life more. And I leave you with this quote here before I talk about something else, that Rumi, one of the great mystics, said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a single drop." So just imagine that when you're meditating on the waves of the ocean and merging your thoughts with the ocean. The other property that he represents is the depth of all things deep. Ulmo represents the deepest parts of Arda and Earth. And so with this power, it allows you to go to the depths of your own soul. Some people are afraid of what lies on the bottom floor of themselves, but it is only things stored in the subconscious that you aren't ready to look at, denying and putting off until you are ready to heal from trauma or events in your life that's hard to look at on a daily basis. Or it's also a denial of your own spiritual awakening too. There's a part of our subconscious that wants to stay asleep, or our ego wants the subconscious to stay so that we can enjoy the world in the way that we would be able to if we weren't always so spiritually aware and awakened. Now that's what I thought. But once you awaken and you remember, it's not that you end life or you don't experience life anymore. You simply move into the next phase of your experience of life itself. And so those that might be in denial or feel like they're not ready for a spiritual awakening of remembering their pure self, remembering their pure state, if it's your time, if you're ready to, then you can harness the powers of Ulmo to really go deep within yourself and remember and not be afraid and not be in denial anymore, but to know all core of yourself, everything within yourself, and have nothing left in the shadows any longer. And that's what shadow work is all about too. It's about going deep into the shadows so that you can shine a light down there so you can then have nothing else in the shadows any longer. Nothing else is in the dark. You know your core until you have another experience, and then you put it back in your subconscious and the work starts again. And it progresses that way. You're never finished, but your experience will expand in life. And I say this, there can be a lot of fear to look at with the abyss of our minds, but there is nothing to actually fear. It is fear itself that causes that. But deep down, you know there is only a soul, a spark of the divine, wishing to express and explore itself fully. A soul with good intentions to explore your life in the best way possible that you can at the time and the consciousness level that you're at. That's what your soul consists of. So there's nothing to be afraid of. It's you. Once you face anything holding you back, you discover it was not such a big obstacle after all. And that the bottom of the ocean is just sand and shells and maybe some old ancient ruins of cities and lost civilizations that went down into the waters. But it's nothing to fear. It's you, the foundation of you. So Ulmo's power is a power we all have when we become unafraid to move into the next phase or transformation of our souls into the depths of exploration of consciousness itself. And once you go deep within and learn who you are at the core, you won't be afraid to look at any perceived flaws or mistakes. You will see them as beauty or opportunities to recreate and expand your consciousness. And a way to see flaws as beauty is to recognize diversity and uniqueness. Like the water experiment, water comes from the same source, but it's unique in its properties, and it contains individual experiences as memory. You are all so unique because of your individual experiences and memory that you contain within. Once you awaken to the idea of not having everything be the same, but everything is beautiful and varied and different, that's when you can accept your flaws and start saying, oh, my crooked teeth, my one eye is bigger than the other. It just makes me different. I'm not a robot. You're not produced and created or designed coming into the physical vessel in order to look all the same as everyone else. You are unique, and it's time that you look at things that you perceive as flaws as just uniquely you, and they make you you in this lifetime, but not you in the next lifetime. So enjoy it, explore your uniqueness, and see those flaws as beauty. and see the mistakes as opportunities to learn from, to recreate from. Just as the universe expands, your consciousness does as well, but you won't expand always playing in shallow waters. At times, you must brave the dark, cool waters and explore what is down there in the abyss. And that's what Ulmo was trying to say, is that the Valar, they were unconcerned with some of the things on Arda because they had their own realms, but Ulmo had the realms of the deep. And he was telling the Valar, there are things you do not know. There are things you cannot see. Only I have seen them. And yet he was humble. He didn't try to dominate. He was in the spirit of harmony. He understood that the other Valar, they had their own perceiving and the place of mind of the Eru Luvatar that they came from. And he knew that that was his special dominion, was the depths. And so this is why this work this week is all about getting to the depths of yourself. And not all Valar are going to do that. But if you are working with Ulmo and harnessing the powers and the energies, you will be able to do this more in your life. And as a personal thought, as being someone who's always been not afraid to swim in the deep waters, I will say that it's not so scary. I don't like to look in the deep all the time because then I can forget living on the surface and I could just forget basically being in life. But there are times when exploring that inner depth is so vital to awakening yourself, waking yourself up while moving around in this world, sometimes asleep because you go along with society and you forget your true self. So go deep as Ulmo, and there will be nothing you cannot face in life when you discover your love of what is down deep in your own soul. Ulmo gave water to the trees of Yavanna, Yavanna, and helped life grow with her. And water is healing for all of life. It's essential. So his powers also get you in touch with more emotional healing and physically healing part of yourself as well. So when you go into the abyss of yourself, there's water there. It's healing. You're not just there alone in the sand and you just have to, brave looking at yourself deeply, but there's water, a nurturing element that is within all life. And so at that point, it becomes a healing ritual. As you go deep, it heals you. You come back up refreshed and renewed, looking at your pure self and at whatever it was that was causing you to act the way that you were doing, or the way to think the way that you have been thinking. It's about looking at the core of yourself and healing from that place with the element of water. And also, when you look deep within yourself, I will say, and you get to the point where you're unafraid to do so, you will be able to go deeper within yourself, and you can help others also go deeper within themselves and finally heal. So let's talk about crystals to help amplify these energies. There are certain crystals and different types of minerals that I have put together as a way to just use in tools of meditation or around your home. If you really want to bring forth the power of Ulmo and the intuition more, then these are the crystals to definitely use. Moonstone, I thought, would be a wonderful crystal. It's one that's mentioned in Tolkien's Legendarium, and it's connected to the moon energies that pull on the tides of the waves. The moon is always connected to water in that way. And Moonstone is a gentle stone that helps you go deeper into your intuition. It will pull on the tides of your own emotions, bringing to surface what is lurking underneath that you need to deal with, but in a loving way. Moonstone is very gentle and subtle. When you put on a moonstone necklace or wear a moonstone crown, it's not going to automatically just bring things up. You're going to go through your life wearing that moonstone, and just slowly and subtly, it'll kind of work out these things that are lurking underneath and bring forth your intuition and your intuitive powers more to get really deep in there. Moonstone is a great crystal that represents Ulmo's powers. And Ulmo also talked about pearls and conch shells, like the shells that you put up to your ear. So I believe that pearls are also a special type of mineral that can help, that bring that vibration of the ocean and the depths. They are a treasure to the Teleri elves. They were known to use pearls and scatter pearls across the shores, and it was a beautiful place that they lived in. Eldamar and the shorelines of these elven cities were scattered with all these beautiful crystals and pearls. And they would wear pearls as a symbol as well. And Ulmo would give them as a gift. And so they would treasure them. And pearls help bring clarity to mind and remind us of patience. They symbolize patience and grace. When you wear pearls, it's very graceful and elegant, but there's patience within making a pearl. It takes a long time for a mollusk to actually create a pearl just by an irritation of a grain of sand within it. And then pearls are made, and they become these beautiful things. It shows that from irritation, something frustrating and irritating, if you work at it long enough to heal and to remove it, it can become something really beautiful and treasured. So I think a pearl is a really great symbol, and it's also something that Tolkien wrote about that was a treasure among the elves. Also, the conch shells, having one in the house is connecting you to the instrument of Ulmo that you can still hear the sounds of the ocean in. We know by science that it's not actually the ocean's sounds, because it's now considered just the amplified sounds around you that cause kind of the sound of the waves, and you could get it by just cupping your hands. You could hear it. Yeah, I can hear it. But it still does not take away from the idea that when you put a shell up to your ear, it does remind you of the ocean waves. So it's nice to have in your house, and helps to transport you to a place of being in that solitude, in that place of quiet near the ocean, which the Teleri elves would go sit on the shorelines, and they would get messages from Ulmo, as well as man as well. But sometimes they had a hard time understanding and deciphering the messages, but the elves could read the messages very clearly, and that was the difference. So that one I would definitely recommend. I also would recommend Larimar, which is part of my crown here. And it's also associated with the ocean, and it's known by its deep, beautiful blues or turquoise blues with white veins inside. And it looks like pools of ocean with white lines. And it just looks like a beautiful, shallow, like pool of ocean, like by the beach. And it really helps. It's a stone that really helps healing and quieting the mind, relaxing the mind too. Very, very good. The energies are very high in that regard. Now, Tolkien did not necessarily talk about Larimar, but I just wrote it down as definitely a stone that can help you get in touch with those energies of the ocean. And lastly, Beryl. Beryl is aquamarine or emerald, but in Tolkien's books, he talked about emerald and he talked about beryl. And beryl comes in the form of aquamarine, which is a very light, pale blue stone. And it's mentioned in the Fellowship of the Ring book as elf stone. And it's a stone that works on the throat chakra, bringing creative and intuitive thoughts to self-expression. And so it's a very good stone for helping you get to the depths of yourself, the depths of your soul, and being more emotionally expressive with that. Also, it brings emotional understanding, leading you to healing. So aquamarine is very good for those that just want to go a little bit deeper into their own selves and become a divine expression of their own unique soul on earth that will help the whole, the universal consciousness, the pure source, the one ocean that we all stem from. So I hope that you enjoyed swimming very deep with me about Ulmo, and that you will join me at 8 on Sunday for the special ritual to help harness these powers of Ulmo. And we have a meditation that you can do as well to help you even more. Have a wonderful day. Namaste.